Hello and welcome to the stream of the evening. We are doing English today because we have some guests that are coming and calling in from one from America and another American from Spain, if I'm not completely mistaken. We are talking to the one and only Andrew DeAngelo is going to show up and give us some of his insights. And we're also going to be speaking to Richard Cowan, one of the people that is representing Normal. Normal is a huge, very, very old legalization or normalization of cannabis organization. They're a lobbyist group. Very, very nice. So it's going to be awesome to hear what he has to speak, what he has to say, what he has to speak about. Holy shit, I'm losing my English. But before that, you're stuck with me since Moa is not here with me today. Hopefully, we'll see her next week as usual. But yeah, it's going to be a pretty packed stream, I hope, for tonight. And since I have a very early morning, I hope we are not going to extend it far too long. But like always, we have a couple of news that we want to start with. But I see some chat. Thomas Lundholm from Umeå is here. Very nice to have you here. Yeah, very nice to have you here. Hope that you will return. This is the place for the discussion of cannabis in Sweden, I would say. Normally, I do this in Swedish. But since we have American guests today that will be sharing this stream on their social media as well, I will be doing this on English. And unlike last time we were going to do English, I didn't forget to speak English from the start. So, with those words, maybe our dear technician could roll the first news. I will be talking about myself because it is the EU election that we are going to talk about. I was both happy and disappointed. Last EU election, I got almost 3,000 votes, beat people like Johan Persson, the party leader for Liberalerna, and a lot of other high-end politician. This year we did not get that far. I managed to scramble 1,190 votes, which is also very, very nice. It's a lot of votes. I was the second most crossed pirate. The only one that got more votes than me was our party leader, Katarina Stensson. How did Pirate Party do in total? Well, we fucked up. No, it wasn't very good. I'm not gonna go into that. That's depressing. Even more depressing so is that we lost two of our Czech mandates. So the Czech are down to one from three, and the Germans are out. So we no longer have a German pirate. So we have one pirate in the EU right now, which is a lot fewer than we need because the pirates we have really done some damage to the union, so to speak. There has been a lot of important issue regarding our internet that has been defended by the pirates. Not really sure who's gonna pick up that torch right now. A lot of people are claiming that the Vänsterpartiet is gonna take on that, and I have about this much faith in them. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I at least got as much support as needed to keep building a platform, because we all know that politics is all about money, and the one thing I've never had in any election is money. So hopefully we can change that to the next national election in 2 years. I hope to be running even for that, but you never know. Maybe I'll find something else to do in the way, but hopefully I will find the energy, strength, and determination that is needed to run even that. One of the most joyful thing about this election for me is that the right wing party, the Swedish Democrats, Sverigedemokraterna, I said every other party name in Swedish, so why not? They were expecting to be the second biggest party in Sweden, and they were not. They became the fourth biggest party, and this was the first election that they went back, which was awesome to see. Not really sure how I feel about Miljöpartiet or the Environmental Party becoming the third, but it's better than the Swedish Democrats at least. So it's something, you know. But I had hoped for a bit more votes than 1190, but you take what you get. Like I said, there's, even if you look at the big parties, the parties who has the governmental funding and stuff like that, very, very few politicians got more than 1,000 personal votes. So just the fact that I am on 4 digits is really big for me, and I'm really happy. So this gives me the, I don't know, the backwind to feel that you really want me to continue doing this, and I will. Anon Haringanam, why did I say that with an American? I don't know. Anon Haringanam, the right went backwards overall, and other alternative parties like Medborgerlig Samling went nowhere either. Folklistan, not a big election for smaller parties. Well, I think that there's a lot of different reason why Med and Folklistan didn't go anywhere. Med doesn't really fill any shoes. They're only here to be Moderaterna, but light. Or sometimes not so light. I don't really know, but they're just another borgerligt parti, so I don't really know what they're going to do. Folklistan, I actually was scared of in the beginning, and I do believe that they took a lot of the votes that normally would have gone to me. But I was also really sad to see those votes go, because Sara, who has been their player in the EU Parliament, has done nothing for cannabis. If she really wanted to, she would have. There is coalitions, there is talks in the hallways about it and stuff like that. Sara has not been to one of those. That Jan Emanuel was going to lift a finger for anything but himself, I found very unlikely. And that the Quran burning Rasmus Paludan was on the list was just a big red flag for me. So, yeah, Folklistan, they didn't stand for anything. Med, there's other people standing for what they stand for. So, yeah, but I do believe that both Med and Folklistan took a lot of cannabis votes because people actually think that they can and would do something, which I think is naive, to say the least. Very naive. Well, let's continue to the next news. This was, I talked a lot about this one. The cannabis question, the cannabis idea will be hot in Brussels this mandate period. This is as normal, a very well-written text by Christian Engström about cannabis in the EU. And I also agree with Christian, and I think that the cannabis issue is going to be a very, very large discussion this mandate period, because like we know, Germany has set out to make cannabis made in Germany an export product, and to do that they're going to really have to regulate it through the union. And there's a lot of people in the union that definitely don't want that. So it's going to be interesting to see how the talks go. I will be following them as closely as I can from the sidelines, so to speak, because 11,000 no 11,000 1190 votes does not get you a seat. Yeah, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in cannabis in the EU to read Christian's text. And speaking of cannabis in the EU, there has been a rather interesting news the last 2 days that I have been looking into a lot. So let's hop on to the next train. Because chill mood. German police that brought beer ban on the English fans says that they should smoke cannabis instead. And I almost swallowed my coffee on the wrong. I almost breathed in my coffee, I should say, when I first heard this, because in my understanding of the German law and the legislation, it's almost certainly so that tourists cannot use cannabis in Germany. So I actually did not believe this news. When I first saw it, I said that this is some bullshit or something made up or whatever. But it actually seemed that it's not the case. I would say that the police officer who said it with sort of joke in spirit, but also I've spoken to quite a few people that is down to see the soccer games, that the police are not really doing anything to tourists that are smoking. So I do believe that the German police have been ordered to not be so anal about who smokes and not, if it's in general or if it's just for the soccer games, who knows. um, I think it's a step forward, because you all know what I stand. I don't think that the police should spend their resources on cannabis smokers as long as they're adults and not harming themselves or anybody else. Of course, they should take care of children and people who can't handle it, but yeah, you know that's a different story. So this is also going to be a very interesting topic to follow, because I do believe that the German police force will have some repercussions from this, because this news has really gone viral. Um, and speaking of viral, oh, here we go with the segues. We are going to take a look at the last news before we welcome our guests to the show. And this is actually from Svenska Dagbladet, but it does contain Christian Engström. Christian Engström and Sara Skyttedal wrote an answer to the sobriety lobbyists' the ridiculous debate article. And I can just say that, as always, when Christian is writing, I agree. This time, this says that EU can learn from Canada's successful legalization, and I do really believe that they can. Those of you who have heard me speak about it, you know that I was very critical to the early days of the Canadian legalization. I believe that, like in a lot of these countries that did legalize early, you did not have the voice of the cannabis movement incorporated at all, which means that you made a ton of mistakes that you shouldn't do. For an example, the quality of the cannabis sold was too low. The quantities of the cannabis available was too low. The selling and control of the idea was too complicated, which created huge lines that illegal dealers started selling in these lines, which is just ridiculous. Then they did a lot of other really smart things. I mean, again, you know that I really like the initiative Joints for Jabs. That's a really good I like carrot and not the whip when it comes to this kind of thing. And joints for jabs were just perfect. What they did was they offered joints to anybody who got the vaccination needle for the COVID vaccine. Yes, we can speak some of the time about the vaccine and stuff. I'm not going to go into that now. It was the joints for jabs, yeah, campaign that I really, really liked. But yeah, Saga was the one was the one I was speaking about before when we spoke about Folklistan, and I still have some. I don't trust her. I just don't. I don't think she will actually fight for the cannabis question. Something that I think that she said in the interview that we made with her here in Cannabis and Focus. But it's the same like Romina Pourmokhtari, our climate minister. Uh, Last national election, she had a huge campaign about I'm going to fight for cannabis and blah, 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 blah. And then she got elected and she didn't do nothing. She hasn't answered any of the emails I sent to her or her staff. She hasn't, yeah, she's just ghosted everybody that she was talking to. And this is the girl that sat opposite to me on a podcast called Got Snack and promised me that if she were elected, she would fight for cannabis. And she did not. But you know the saying, never trust a liberal. Maybe it's true. I, for one, spent a lot of my own campaigning resources on pushing her as well. Not going to do that mistake again. That was a fucking lie. And to anybody I pushed into voting for her, I am sorry. I will not make that mistake again. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. That is pretty apparent in these questions. 332 is writing, these specific elections were primarily driven by a surge in the authoritarian right and the counter reaction to that, leaving little space for PP's primary areas. I completely agree with you. The thing is that people don't really understand how important internet is. And it's really, really sad. And we have a couple of minutes. So when I first became a pirate, I was just a cannabis activist. And I spoke to the former Pirate Party leader called Magnus Andersson, who is now sailing around the world. And he simply asked me, which question is more important, cannabis or the internet? And I basically told him, well, stupid, of course it's cannabis. Nobody in Sweden is dying because of the internet freedom. And he said, well, how are you going to run your campaign if the internet is not free? And then I joined the Pirate Party because he was absolutely right. As a cannabis activist, I have been writing debate article after debate article. I've sent text after text to different medias. I emailed media productions trying to get on television. And despite what some people are saying, it's not because I have a wish to be famous. It is because I want to speak about cannabis. And I believe that the people that are currently being allowed to speak about cannabis isn't tough enough. We are letting the opposition blatantly lie and just repeat these old war on drug stigmas. And nobody's calling them out on it. Nobody. But none of these productions have even answered me. None of the newspapers want to publish anything I write. So yeah, I am stuck with the internet and you guys. And I love you guys. I really do, because you're at least a lot of you are listening to me. And I would just hope to just have a small chance to maybe sit in SVT, and I'm not even asking to talk to anybody important. I mean, set me up with some of the sobriety movement's lobbyists. No problem. Because they haven't got shit. they haven't got any arguments. It's just air. But yeah, we'll see if this is starting to change soon. But currently, I have no faith in our mainstream media to be the one to open up to this at all, because some of them have made it pretty blatantly is that they don't want me, um, and if they're the one that's going to choose, then so be it. I'm not going to stop fighting just because they are idiots. Um, but I'm not going to fight for them when for example, the right wings want to tear them down because that's what they're doing. Um, so yeah, we're going to see a lot more right wing oriented media in the future, I think, and not as much cannabis as we want. But you know what? We have cannabis in focus. And with those words, I think it is time to bring our guests in.
Hello.
Hello, Andrew and Richard.
Good evening.
Hi, Otto.
Yeah,
Hi, Richard.
yeah,
Hello,
yeah.
Andrew. Good to see
If we
you.
start with Richard, how are you today?
Well, I'm fine. By the way, I am actually in Berlin right now because
Oh,
I came up here to see the big expo of Mary Jane, and it was it was too big. They had to actually close the doors because the hall was too full, and it was just and it was very long lines and everything, and it was a huge success. And of course, nothing succeeds like success, and it gets the attention of the politicians. And it's the new German laws are. Pretty much as you described, if you wanted to make them fail, this is the sort of thing you would do. But when you have this kind of success with a big crowds and everything, and particularly obviously in a place as influential as Berlin, this I think got everybody's attention. And the German laws are barely adequate, but they are a start. And you are quite right about the mess in the United States. We have, of course, the way our Constitution is that each state has its own laws regulating things, and some states, like my native Texas, doesn't really have even an adequate medical laws, and Mississippi passed a medical law over the opposition of even the state's medical association, and it is, shall we say, I don't think anybody would be terribly surprised to know that Mississippi has a really racist history, uh, and this has really been a total mess. So what Germany is doing is a really brave start, and so I'm very pleased about that.
hmm. But in general, how was the fair? Did you see anything? Did you see anything that surprised you?
Well, actually, the thing that surprised me was just the huge size. The of it, how many people came. I come from a place when I lived in the States, the last place I lived was Las Vegas, which is wide open. So, yeah, and of course, that in Southern California. So, no, I wasn't going to see anything that was terribly shocking. But the fact is that uh, Germany has some of the most liberal laws for alcohol. Uh, German kids can drink at 14 if they're with their parents' permission. They can go buy, they can still buy beer at 16. The thing that really bugs me about Germany and about every place else in the world is that right next to Germany, there's this country called the Netherlands. Um, and I know that there are rumors that it doesn't exist, but for 50 years, you've been able to go into almost any town of any size and go into a thing called a coffee shop and buy cannabis. It started out as smuggled hash, and then it became nader hash and nader weed. Uh, but that is, ignoring that. I mean, the Netherlands is in the top 10 of any list of successful countries, in terms of public health and everything else. And there is not a, you would, by the way the prohibitions lie, you would think the streets are full of dead bodies. It's just, and the U.S. drug czars actually used to come to Amsterdam to lie about what they were seeing in Amsterdam. And oh, by the way, I want to salute you, because Sweden is perhaps the most difficult venue outside of Saudi Arabia. And it really, it's so funny is that growing up in the States, Sweden was identified with social liberalism. Yeah, well, it seems funny today, but and the U.S. desegregation decision was based in part on a paper by a Swedish sociologist. So, which again, particularly ironic, because Sweden has totally embraced the most racist thing that the United States government has ever done, and that's a single convention. I mean, the single convention was the product of one of the worst racists in American history. And then when I read...
sorry to interrupt, Dick. Getting back to the conference you're at, I'm curious. Was it mostly business folks at that conference, or was it mostly stoners? Are the attendees that you said came out in force? What was your experience there? Because I didn't get to go to this one.
Well, in terms of just appearances, I mean, there is a huge business interest in it, but it's in Berlin. It's sometimes difficult to tell the hippies from the business people.
Well, maybe that's a good thing for now, right? Maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Well, it wasn't 50 years ago, whenever it was I met your brother.
Yeah, that's right. We were. I think that what me and my brother created can stand up to anything that corporate cannabis has created. Okay, so cool. Berlin sounds like it's popping. Germany sounds like it's popping. Everybody's excited about the framework over there. I think that, there are definitely issues with the framework. I'm sure we could get into that a lot, but I mean, the basic approach of Germany compared to the United States, I like a decentralized supply chain. I like the associations, and I like that, our people are going to be in charge of the supply chain. So, I think all those things are pretty good. I don't like 3 plants. I don't like 500. I don't like certain other aspects of it. But don't you agree that the basics of that framework are something that when we're talking about the cannabis community, we'll get to the corporate folks in a minute, because they're important. Okay. We don't want to piss on the hand that might feed us someday, but we also want to make sure our people aren't left behind, and which is basically what's happened in the United States, and we don't want that to happen in Europe. You mentioned Holland, and Holland is pretty much driven by people who love cannabis for the most part. So like that I think is a cool distinction. So what would you agree with that basic assessment of Germany? And do you think that it'll work? And do you think the rest of maybe a country like Sweden, much more conservative, maybe the most conservative, could the politics change in Sweden? If Germany works out good, and we could see the associations happen, I'll say here in Sweden, even though I'm not in Sweden, I know most of the listeners.
You miss it, Andrew.
Oh, hell yeah, man. I wish I was there. The sun never goes down this time of year. So what do you think, Dick? Huh?
Well, I think the most important thing about the premise for the legalization, quote unquote, is that their target is eliminating the black market. And I think that as a rhetorical thing and as a practical matter, is the most important thing. The idea that, and this, of course, California is perhaps the most extreme case of the black market simply overwhelming the mess made of legalization. And so the idea is, you know, particularly here in Europe, you have, and I live in Spain, and Spain has a huge problem with drugs coming through from Africa, hashish, of course, and this is so much like the relationship between Mexico and the United States that the marijuana smuggling from the good old days became a big business, and then the gangs took over, and then they started bringing in everything, and so the black market is the problem. And if you really are going to have a successful cannabis policy, you're going to have to eliminate the black market. You don't want cannabis and cannabis smuggling to be a vehicle for all of the hard drugs that come in to Europe, either through Africa or through Antwerp and Rotterdam. So you have the whole thing is really, gee, why do you want to keep cannabis in the black market with cocaine? Gee, why do you want to subsidize terrorists and gangsters? Oh, well, I'm sure you have a very good reason for subsidizing gangsters and terrorists. And oh, don't the police have better things to do these days? Uh, I mean, police resources are finite, and the amount of police resources that go into cannabis prohibition is really astonishing. This is true, by the way, in the Netherlands because the wholesale is still illegal. So there are something like 1,000 police raids on cannabis farms in the Netherlands every year. And these are police resources that need to be spent on other things. You could take a whole long list of other things that would be better off doing. And so oh, you're a conservative. Oh, that's really interesting. Why do you want to subsidize the underworld? You're you and of course the idea is we're concerned about immigration. All of the underworld is subsidized by drug smuggling.
Yeah.
The mayor of Amsterdam has actually called for the basic legalization, quote unquote, of cocaine because the smuggling of it has become such a huge business.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
so,
Netherlands also
yes,
have trials with growing legal cannabis. So they are changing it in the Netherlands, or Holland, as Andrew called it.
well,
Um, yeah.
they are, but only this is the funny thing. Is that they have been arguing about doing this, and of course this is very Dutch, about exactly how to do this, and they're going to do it first in a few provinces. Oh, we can't do it in Amsterdam because whatever, and it won't work. I mean, what they're trying to do is something that sort of made sense 10 years ago, but the Dutch, God bless them, have a really, I mean, it's a small country where they operate pretty much by consensus. Everybody gets together and they're very blunt, which is very good. But the what they're trying to do won't work. Again, the idea is to eliminate the black market. And by the way, an awful lot of the uh, Dutch market is in fact supplied by home growers. And this is another thing that the Germans, three plants makes no sense.
Right,
And
right. But I mean, what I'm worried about is that our people are in the underground market. are people that love the plant, that have carried the plant through the darkest days of prohibition, that are the home growers, that are in the decentralized supply chains, whether it be 3 plants or 30 plants or 300 plants, our people are in the underground market. So when you talk about eliminating the underground market, I worry that our people are going to end up in prison again if the barriers to entry are so high that we can't keep doing what we've been doing for our entire lives. You know what I'm saying,
I
Dick?
agree.
I worry
The
about that.
Well, the answer to that is that to take an entirely different view of the home growers and what might call artisanal growers, where people are growing and are really committed to the plant. They should be incorporated into the legal supply chain. They are not the problem. That isn't the black market that is the problem. The black market are the gangsters, the smugglers, the not the people who are growing there in at home in Germany or in Holland or wherever. Uh, and so people should be able to set up a grow and you know as I know a lot of people have discovered, it isn't that easy to grow cannabis. Everybody, oh, I'm going to go put some seeds in the ground and I'm going to get rich.
Thank you. I mean, anybody can grow a plant. To getting it potent, that's a different story.
Well, it's it's like the difference between flying a Piper Cub and I don't know if they still make those, and flying a 747. The whole idea, once you go to scale, you're really dealing with a whole bunch of different factors. So, but yeah, what Andrew's point is exactly right. That first off, obviously, they're our people. They're my friends, your friends. So my idea isn't by no means is to throw them to the wolves. On the contrary, they really should have to be incorporated into anything. Otherwise, you're not dealing with honestly with the problem. The problem is not the home growers. The problems are not the artisanal growers. The problem are the gangs, and that's you can define a black market so that 3 people or 4 people. Well, that would be 4 plants in the black market. That's dumb.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's
it's an interesting policy question. I think that the Germans are trying to err on the side, as is the custom in Germany, on the side of being very conservative, right? And so it's going to be impossible if 3 plants is the limit for quote unquote scale to happen. But the 3 plant limit may not support the clubs, and that could cause all kinds of problems. But they'll learn that, right? I mean, I think the basic premise of what you're saying is correct. I think that the other part of this equation is the consumer, right, and the stoner and the patient, and making sure that they understand, who they're supporting with their cannabis dollars, if we can make accessibility. If we got to outcompete the underground market at a certain point, right? You have to have accessibility. The underground market is everywhere, so it's very accessible. The underground market has pretty high quality cannabis if you know the right person. And the underground market has pretty competitive prices, lower prices than any other market. And so when those 3 things are present in the market, that market's going to win. It doesn't matter if you're selling cannabis or if you're selling, ceramics. It really doesn't matter. And so I think that the frameworks have to, yes, incorporate our people into supply chain so that we have the quality, so we can outcompete the underground market in the quality, like Otto was saying. There's step number 1. because stoners are always going to go for the quality every single time. I don't care.
Yep.
They don't care what door they have to walk into. And so then there's accessibility and there's price. And if we can, align all those things and make sure our people are in there, and in fact, I would argue are in charge of the thing, not the corporate people. Working side by side, I would think, is the best outcome, really, with the corporate people. Then we can create what I call a singular market, so that we don't have all this fragmentation between legal markets and underground markets, and even hemp-derived markets, if you want to start getting into that.
The gas station weed.
And all this fragmentation is not good for anybody. And so I think that, when we're talking about creating one market, I think those are the fundamentals, don't you think, Dick? I mean, of how how we operationalize that.
Well, first off, the idea of looking at the mess, the last really big mid-bin, $1.5 billion valuation at one point. Now it's bankrupt. That how many various cannabis companies have lost total of billions of dollars have been lost in Canada in particular, because that's where the biggest companies were. But the idea is, again, it is the comparisons, which of course the prohibitionists love, like big tobacco. So now they've got big marijuana, utter nonsense. But the whole point about getting it out of the black market, and again, part of that is how you define the black market. If you make it legal to grow any number of plants, as long as you do it right, then that's really the best way to eliminate the black market, and at the same time give the consumers what they want. Because people, the growers, they love the plants, but they also like to be able to sell them, because it's one thing unless you're a hobbyist. And by the way, I've known quite a number of people who had grows in their garage and never sold an ounce because they just like growing the plant. But by the way, the one to give the German government credit where it's due is that the new medical laws are really pretty good. You can go to a doctor. The doctor can write a prescription. There are pharmacies that actually will fill the prescription, and doing it with the particular varietals that they will have the ratios of THC and CBD as a part of the description, so that the patient can then try, do I do better with this or with that? And the doctors who specialize in this, and they are really know what they're doing. And so this isn't like what you have in the United States, where where do I sign? And the first time I went to a doctor in California, the late great Jack sent me. I got this guy. You go see him. And I did. But this is the Germans are doing it, and of course in a very German way. They are actually going into it and very thorough. My view of what has happened now so far, other than I say the medical is really quite good, but the rest of it is a step in the right direction for the most part. But the idea is, if you hold up the idea of getting it out of the black market, that is the key. And you're quite right about saying that you obviously you don't want to criminalize everybody other than a favored few. So the Germans are really beginning now, but at the same time, again, this little country next door has for 50 years, they've been selling weed, or cannabis in a variety of ways, over the counter, and no problems. and and the only thing in Britain that works is the monarchy. I think maybe they should just abolish everything and keep the royal family. The idiotic mess they have.
Yeah.
They have had medical cannabis in the Netherlands since 2018, and a third of the police don't know it. I mean, so that sometimes if the police encounter a patient, they'll end up arresting the patient for something that isn't a crime.
Yeah. But the laws in Netherlands are quite wonky because there's zones when you can use it and not. For in Amsterdam, for an example, you can only use it within the city center. If you go outside of it, the police will come down on you. But yeah, that's a different story. Listen, I felt that we started this in the sort of the wrong, in the wrong way. Um, Richard, for those Swedes who have never seen your face, um, who are you?
Well, it turns out that I'm actually very familiar with Swedish laws because I was writing I guess you would call it a blog, starting in 1997, and
Oh.
the and so I can remember there was actually a group called the Hasidic Nordic Network, and they're now defunct, but they were hilarious because they were just obsessed. They really wanted to nuke the Netherlands. I mean, they just couldn't stand it. But I met Andrew's brother in 1992 in Washington. I had just become the national director of Normal, and I met this really nice hippie who provided me with some very nice weed, and we became dear friends. And then he became a more successful capitalist than I was. So but I got involved entirely by accident in the marijuana reform movement in 1972. I'm from Texas. In 1967, a good friend said, "You want to smoke some grass?" It was, and so I did, and I didn't get high. And not too long after that, another friend says, "You want to smoke some grass?" And I did, and I didn't get high. But I'm, if anything, persistent. So I had this friend with a beard, and he used to be a stockbroker, and he grew a beard, and I heard he smoked grass. So I went over to his house and sort of hinted around, and he says, "You want to try some?" And that time it worked. And
Oh.
and so I bought a lid of grass, as they called it in those days. Later on, I started smoking pot, which I was still grass, and then and now I'm smoking weed. But so now it's been 60 some odd years, I think, or something like that. No, not quite, 55 years. So so far so good. But
Well,
it's yeah. Uh, I ended up uh, in Washington D.C. in 1972. I was planning. My family's all Republican, so I was planning on going to. I'd been the president of the Young Republicans when I was in college, so I was going to go to work for to reelect Richard Nixon. And uh, instead, I went to the Normal office, and the guy Keith Stroup, who's the founder of Normal, had I asked, you have any letters from people who got been arrested? And he says, filing cabinets full of them. And so he just pointed me at them, and I sat down in the room, and I started reading the letters. And about an hour later, I had tears in my eyes, and everything I thought I believed in was in the Republican Party was a lie, and all the talk about freedom, the lie. And so that changed my life. And so I got involved with the marijuana reform movement and did some writing about it and everything. And it just, one thing led to another over a period of time. And so here I am. uh, I, it still bugs me, the idea that, hell, I'm going to be 84 in a few days. and I have to sneak around to do something that I was doing in Fort Worth and sneaking around doing in Fort Worth in 1967. And by the way, when we got the laws changed in 73 in Texas, there were 800 people doing in prison for less than 1 ounce of marijuana. Of the of them, 80 were doing life for less than 1 ounce of marijuana. Now, you know, the whole business of how many tens of millions of Americans have been arrested. And so anytime anybody, oh, the children, what about the children of 30 million Americans? What impact does being arrested? Oh, marijuana may cause this, that, or the other. What does being arrested and put in prison cause? Is that good for your mental health? Yeah. Yeah. Sweden is famous for its public health. Yeah. But the idea of arresting people for using a plant, is that good public health? No, don't get me started.
No, I know, and this, I don't know where all this comes from. That Sweden is such a good place, and we have so much freedom, and we have so much healthcare and stuff like that. I mean, that's just a giant marketing campaign. Sweden sucks. I moved away from Sweden.
Well, I hear the sex is good.
Well,
Also, the chocolate.
yeah. Well, look, Dick's been doing this a long time. I've been doing this a long time. Otto, you've been working on this for a long time too, and we gotta keep at it. In some ways, it feels like we've made a lot of progress when you look at legalization. When you look at legalization, the movement and the progress, the things we've gotten done. But then there are other times when it feels like we're not making much progress at all. And Sweden is a place where it feels like that. I've been, for a couple of years now, I've been working with REM Life. I've been working with you, Otto. We've been trying to get the word out. We've been trying to influence elected officials. We've been trying to protect patients. We've been trying to create access to clinics. We've been trying to get doctors to be brave enough to write prescriptions, and all of those things has been a bloody struggle, man. And we have not won. We have lost. We have lost all of those battles. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have. It doesn't mean we're gonna stop trying. We'll never stop trying. But it's dark, it's a dark time in some places like Sweden. There's a more hopeful vibe happening in places like the United States right now, and Germany right now, and maybe Canada. But things move so slowly. This is not something that should have taken my entire life to get done. This is not something that should have taken Richard's entire life to get done. Who knows if me and Richard will see the end of all of this before we die? I don't know. With the pace of the way things are going now, it doesn't. I'm pessimistic. And this is a healing plant that has no business ever being prohibited, ever. It's just the craziest thing that humanity's almost ever done, other than, fry the planet that we live on. I mean, that's probably a little more crazier, but they're related, right? Because this is a plant that could really help reverse global warming and capture carbon and all the rest of it. So, sometimes I feel like I have such mixed feelings, man. Don't you? I mean, there's some days I wake up and it feels like we're winning, and there's other days I wake up and it feels like we're stuck.
Well, in writing back in the 1970s, I said I expected cannabis to be legalized in the 70s. So 50 years later, the thing that really bugs me is the I'm not a person who believes in conspiracy theories too much, because I know too many people in high places who couldn't conspire their way out of a paper bag. The idea, it's sort of like these idiot program things that run on Instagram. The Rockefellers and the Rothschilds are running. No, they, but how in the hell do you keep 30 million arrests from a secret that nobody knows? How the hell does the medical profession ignore guys who are human beings who are vomiting so violently that they would rather die, when they know that a plant, a couple of tokes on a joint, will stop it? Yeah. And the idea that, oh, well, we have a pill for that now. The pill is THC. And try taking a pill when you're vomiting.
Yeah, exactly.
And these people run around in white jackets and expect to be called doctors. Yeah. And it isn't like, oh, this is some hippie said that. The late, great Stephen Jay Gould, who was one of the great scientists in America, used it, and unfortunately he died, but he wrote about how he used cannabis. Richard Brookhiser is a conservative historian, the same thing. Fortunately, Richard survived. But these are people who had the best medical care possible. And again, mental health. I've had people tell me, this is something that really shook me, I haven't tried to kill myself since I started using marijuana. When people say that to you, talking about mental health,
Mm-hmm.
I remember that as clearly as anything in my whole life. And some damn quack goes, well, we know that if we could eliminate cannabis in the United Kingdom, we could reduce the number of schizophrenics by 15%. That's actually, and schizophrenia is a terrible, terrible thing, but it represents less than one half of 1% of the total population. How many people's alcohol here? And my mother and my sister died of alcoholism. Alcohol has taken a terrible toll on my family.
Me too. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, alcohol is fucked up.
Perfectly legal.
Put it this way, I've had more than my share. But I've had more than my share. I've had more than my share of most everything. And Andrew, I'm planning on living to be 120, so I'm going to get the goddamn thing done.
Good for you, man. I plan on a long life myself.
I plan on a happy life. That's what I always say. I don't care how long it is, as long as I can stay happy. We're almost out of time. We're going to run out a bit, but I do want, especially, my last question, at least for Richard. Can you give me the elevator pitch on weed.de?
Well, it's basically aimed at working around the very tight regulations in the German system, and so it is basically a finder thing. Here's how you get medical weed, or here's how you can find join a club. It's basically one of my favorite lines is looking for a loophole, and this is the idea of finding ways to obey the German laws. And I don't think that ultimately they're going to work in the long term, but in the short term, there really are ways for people to find doctors, find pharmacists, find clubs. And if people are, you can grow 3 plants, but people are sure buying a lot of seeds if they're only going to grow 3 plants. So this is a start, and you take what you can get while you can get it. But I think that the main thing is about this is that once you give people freedom, it's hard to take it away from them.
Yeah.
And if your objective really is to eliminate the black market, then good start, but only a start. And then at some point or other, the Swedish socialists will will notice that Sweden is right up there with North Korea.
Oh, I would argue that we're worse in some. Yeah.
Well, your royal family has more class. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, if we just continue with, I'm gonna do one last question. Do you think there will be a European legalization in the near future?
No. I in the near future, no, simply because there are so many different countries involved in the process. But the thing is, they have to begin with one really important point, and that is the so-called Single Convention of 1961 is a racist scam. And if the government of Sweden wants to be identified with the worst racist ever to come out of the United States, if you want to live with the shame of, say, some whose obsession was with jazz musicians, who's somebody who got the Single Convention passed, and then his point about that was, now they'll never legalize marijuana. That was the whole point about the Single Convention. It was marijuana. And the reason he was opposed to marijuana because he was a racist.
Yeah.
So that is, but so I think the point of attack for European cannabis advocates is the Single Convention and the racism behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I would add. Okay, I think I think there's more than one entry point for attack if we want to use words like that. But patient stories, getting these patients in front of the camera and telling their story. Otto, you've done a lot of that work. I know there's a lot of censorship, so those stories can't get in front of as many people in Sweden as we all want, and particularly elected officials, and I'll call it the elite of any society that makes a lot of the decisions. But we have to keep trying. At some point, there's going to be a patient story that is so compelling, that is so remarkable with respect to healing with cannabis, that it will get covered widely and it'll change things. So I think that talking about the Single Convention, talking about cannabis prohibition as a tool of racism and not something that your country and your people want to be associated with, but also, tapping into the heart and the empathy of that's one major way we got things done here in the United States was patients and their stories were able eventually, it took a long time, but eventually were able to be covered by the mainstream media. Once that happened, change started to accelerate a lot.
Oh, it definitely begins with medical. And I make a distinction between medical and recreational, but the fact is that the whole thing began with Dennis Perone in San Francisco in the AIDS community there. That the fact is that people who were who had AIDS, who were using cannabis, lived better and longer than those who didn't. And in that regard, I view medical as one, as as Andrew was saying, is the key ultimately to everything. But in the meantime, the suppression of medical cannabis is murder. It is murder. It is murder. You deprive people. If you know, I remember an old movie where a woman was having a stroke or something or other, and she was reaching for her pills, and the villain moved the pill bottle further away. Melodramatic, but that is exactly what they are doing. It is what the American Medical Association has done. Doctors have turned their backs on the patients. You know, there's nothing subtle about vomiting from chemotherapy. It isn't, oh, well, we need research. What kind of research do you need to see if somebody's vomiting? Because it isn't a mild, I feel, no. I know people who have herniated their esophagus because they're vomiting so violently. I know people who said, I would quit chemo and die rather than go through what I've gone through. If they found the cannabis and they got through the chemo, they survived the cancer. No one should have to do that. It truly, you know, the suffering of, and right now, our goddamn politicians in Washington are having, you know, the Veterans Administration won't allow veterans to the VA, the veteran, you know, hospital system for we care about our veterans. They cannot use cannabis and go to the VA. You know, if this is medicine, this isn't medicine, it's murder. And it isn't rare. It isn't occasional. It is a constant thing. And again, this isn't a bunch of hippies. God bless them. These are, you know, guys who are my age who have, you know, fought in wars for us, who fought for freedom for us. And now the Veterans Administration won't let them have cannabis. There's a
So
special
much for the
place
freedom.
for these people. And if the Swedish government can live with that, well, they need cannabis.
I would love to see the Swedish government smoke some weed. There's a lot of those stick up their asses that I would sure would release if they did. But the problem is most of them have planned their entire life and had their life planned by their parents to become politicians. So one toe out of that box is the most terrifying thing they can do. They can, yeah, just ridiculous. Yeah, but we should wrap this up. I'm going to give both of you one last chance to just say something to the audience. Andrew, you've been silent for a long time, so why don't you start? What would you like to say to the audience and the Swedish population?
Well, I mean, I think that the main takeaway from this conversation for people in Sweden and Northern Europe is just you have to stay active. These laws aren't going to change by themselves. You have to get in the streets. You have to be angry. You have to make noise. You have to put the patients out front. You have to let the politicians know they're supporting something that's racist and abominable in every way. That people are suffering and dying with every hour that we are not creating access to this medicine, and that, you know, the general population is a lot more uptight and suffering from stress and depression and anxiety because there's not access to probably the greatest relaxant on earth. So my big message for everybody in Sweden is don't give up, keep fighting. You're going to get there someday.
Well,
Your turn.
Andrew didn't have a lot of choice about being silent when you're on with me because I tend to get a bit carried away.
Hey man, this was about this was more an interview about you and what you guys are doing with we.dm and you know, I'm just here to kind of spur things along and get some back and forth going. So I think we did that. I think it was a good conversation.
We started in the wrong direction, but it was good.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that basically, I have been at this for a very long time. It has certainly taken a lot longer than I thought it would. But the fact is that we are much more slowly than I would have thought possible making progress. But until we are there, we don't have any choice. You know, one of my favorite quotes is from the Cuban liberator Jose Marti. He said, "To witness a crime in silence is to commit it." And if we who know what's going on, we don't have any choice. We have morally we have to speak up, and it. I I look at the Soviet dissidents who are murdered, and they speak up. I have never had a policeman be rude to me. I've never been afraid. I never had to be. But so for me, it is a moral imperative. I know what's happening. Now, if anybody's been listening to us, you know what's happening. You know what's happening. To witness a crime in silence is to commit it. Think about that. Thank you so much, Otto.
Yeah. No, thank you for coming. And I think I'll be sending you a couple of emails after this. I would like a 4 or 5 hour stream. We have a lot of things to discuss, I think. To our viewers, we'll see you guys next week back in Swedish again. Thank you so much, both Richard and Andrew, for showing up. And to all our viewers, have a really good night. And we'll see you next week. Toodles.
Good night, Otto. Good night, everybody. Richard, great talking to you.
Indeed, bro.